The Inca diet is technically healthier than many modern ones' maize. Potatoes, quinoa, and very little sugar. But once a hole forms in a tooth, it's there to stay, like a tragic love story carved into enamel. Over time, the decay deepens until the tooth just gives up. It either falls out, cracks in half, or becomes a surprise storage chamber for food you thought you already swallowed. Your breath smells like a forgotten tomb. And people don't tell you, because they're polite or maybe because everyone smells like that, and social norms just surrendered centuries ago. An odd historical tidbit, the Inca elite sometimes inlaid their teeth with tiny pieces of turquoise or gold. This wasn't for health, it was for status. So yes, technically, you could have a bejeweled tooth while simultaneously dying of an infection. Dental bling with a side of abscess. Modern influencers. Eat your hearts out when the pain gets too bad. You try herbs. Coca leaves are your best friend. They numb your mouth just enough to convince you that dying of tooth pain is optional, but they also numb your judgment, which is why you once tried biting into roasted corn again. Fool you once, shame on the Inca gods. Fool you twice. Welcome to the mashed root diet. Every winter, someone loses a few teeth to cold-related swelling. Your gums get tight, then inflamed, and eventually the teeth just evacuate like tiny white deserters. You don't even blame them. Wouldn't you leave? 2. You lie awake some nights because the pounding in your mouth outpaces the pounding of your heart. And you wonder what's worse, starving slowly or living long enough to lose every tooth one by one. The answer, of course, is both. Together, while chewing uncooked quinoa, the sun hasn't risen yet, but you're already awake not out of ambition, but obligation. Life in your Inca mountain terrace village does not wait for your dreams or your back pain. You rise slowly from your llama wool blanket, joints creaking like badly designed pottery, and prepare for your favorite part of the day, mandatory labor until you collapse. You're not unemployed, congratulations. You are actively participating in the sacred cycle of Mita, the Inca rotational labor system. It's sort of like a national service. If national service meant working without pay for most of your life, and by work, we mean hauling heavy stones up steep mountains, digging irrigation canals with nothing but a sharpened stick, or weaving elaborate textiles until your fingers resemble dried cactus. It's not just you. The entire village has a job. Kids, elders, warriors, everyone pitches in. Children as young as 5 are already helping in the fields. Not because child labor laws don't exist, but because childhood as a protected phase of life is a luxury the Andes didn't budget for. Your 6-year-old cousin can already sort potatoes better than most foodies can pronounce yuca. Women do everything. They plant crops, grind maize, weave, cook, clean, raise children, and carry baskets larger than their body mass. You've watched your mother carry 3 amphorae of water up a 60-degree slope while pregnant and still apologize for being a little slow today. Meanwhile, you tripped over a chicken this morning and had to lie down for 15 minutes. You're on terrace duty this season. That means sunrise to sundown tending steep, carved layers of mountain agriculture. You start at the top, where the wind slices through your tunic like a passive-aggressive ghost. Then you climb down, planting quinoa in rows so precise they'd impress modern-day spreadsheets. Then back up, then down. Repeat until your legs forget how walking works. Tools. Sure, you get a digging stick and optimism. Maybe a stone hoe if you're lucky or particularly persuasive. There are no tractors, no plows, no brakes. It's all human-powered, and your human parts are beginning to protest. Loudly, you eat lunch in the field, which is generous. It's the same as dinner, which is the same as yesterday, boiled potatoes and chicha. A fermented corn drink that's 30% hydration, 70%. I hope this doesn't rot my stomach lining. Fun fact, some women chew the maize to help start fermentation. Yes, your drink is pre-chewed. Bon appetit. Back to work. You help lay new irrigation channels, and for a brief moment, you feel pride. The water flows just right, the maize glistens. Then a stone slips, you stub your toe, and remember that your job has no workers' compensation. If you're injured, someone else gets your quota. The Empire doesn't wait for sprained ankles. Some days, you're pulled off terrace duty and reassigned to state projects. You help build roads, temples, or massive storage houses, colcas. They call this labor for the sapper Inca, basically. You're paying tax with your spine. Historians still argue whether the mita was brutal or brilliant, oppressive or organized. All you know is that it's unpaid and unavoidable. You fantasize about switching jobs, maybe a llama herder, but then you remember your cousin was kicked into a ditch last week by an angry llama with trust issues. A potter sounds artistic until you realize how much time they spend inhaling smoke in a tiny mud hut. Even priests have back pain. No one is reclining on silk pillows around here unless you count the mummified royals. As dusk falls, your knees scream, your hands are raw, and your neck has become one solid knot. You walk home, stepping around alpaca droppings and rogue guinea pigs. You've earned exactly 0 coins. But your terrace looks neat, and the empire continues to function. Congratulations. You are an irreplaceable cog in the glorious machinery of Inca civilization. You lie down, knowing that tomorrow will be the same. Unless the gods intervene, or your legs give out, or both. Night doesn't last long here, or at least not long enough. Because at this altitude surprise, the weather has its own agenda, and it's mostly, how else can I ruin your comfort today? You wake up curled like a potato bug, wrapped in a thin alpaca wool blanket that, despite its handmade excellence, has the insulation power of a whisper. The stone floor beneath you might as well be a glacier. And no, there's no fire. Because firewood is scarce, and last night's embers died the moment someone sneezed too close. Winter in an Inca mountain village is a masterpiece of atmospheric betrayal. It's not just cold, it's bone-chiseling, brain-numbing, frostbite-flirting cold. The kind of cold that teaches you new definitions of awake. You huddle closer to your family not for warmth, really, but for morale. Because when the wind howls through the thatched roof like a gossiping ghost, it helps to be miserable together. Your breath fogs the air, your nose drips without permission, and you pull your single tunic tighter around your chest. Good news, you own clothes. Bad news, they're made of coarse fiber that forgot what the word soft meant. And they've been through every season with you, unwashed, unrelenting. And now more crust than cloth. You step outside and immediately regret it. The wind isn't so much blowing as it is physically trying to push you off the mountain. The frost crunches under your barefoot heel. Yes, barefoot because your sandals, fashioned from llama-hide, broke last week. You stitched them back together with cactus fiber, but now they look more like a philosophical suggestion than footwear. But wait, summer will be better. Right, sort of. If by better, you mean completely different form of discomfort. When the sun rises over the Andes in December, it doesn't flirt, it roasts. The stone terraces bake like pizza ovens. You go from wearing 3 layers of itchy wool to fantasizing about nudity in record time. By midday, your skull feels like it's steaming. Your back is drenched in sweat, and your armpits have declared war. Shade, there's none. Fans never invented. Sunscreen, no, but you do have a traditional salve made from crushed flowers and llama fat, which smells exactly how you think it does. Insects love this weather. They emerge in biblical quantities. Mosquitoes, gnats, ants, they all come to sample the buffet that is your exposed skin. You swat one away, and 5 return. Your ankles become a bumpy roadmap of bites, and the buzzing in your ears feels like a personal attack. Your home doesn't help. It's made of stone, and during the summer, stone acts like a giant heat trap. At night, you lie in bed trying to breathe, listening to the slow sizzle of the walls radiating back every ray of solar energy they've absorbed. There's no breeze, just the slow, sticky embrace of sweat and regret. Some elders say this is the mountain testing you, that the cycles of cold and heat are sacred reminders that you are part of nature. That sounds poetic until your nose bleeds from altitude dryness, and your cousin faints from dehydration. Historians still argue whether Inca architecture efficiently handled seasonal extremes, or if the people simply endured it with supreme grumpiness. You think about your options. Move to the coast, sure, if you want to spend half the year farming salt and avoiding coastal raids. At least up here, the predators are mostly atmospheric. Still, not everything is suffering. Sometimes, when the rain comes brief and blessed, it brings a cooling mist. The smell of wet earth fills the air, and you stand quietly under a clay awning, letting the drops patter gently around you. It lasts 5 minutes, maybe less. But for a moment, the mountain is kind, the wind softens, the heat lifts, and your shoulders, always tense, forget themselves. Then the rain stops. A rainbow arcs over the terraces, and the sun returns with the confidence of a god on tour. You go back to work, squinting at the sky, wondering if tomorrow will burn you, freeze you, or both. Either way, you'll be here. Cold, hot, bitten, soaked, sunburned, but still climbing. You'd think water clear, clean. Life-giving water would be your friend here in your peaceful little Inca mountaintop existence. But no, like everything else in your daily routine, water walks the line between salvation and slow. Intestinal ruin. You fetch it from a canal fed by glacier melt. Sounds romantic. Right mountain spring water. Crystal clear, flowing straight from Pachamama herself. Except it's not exactly your canal. It's the state's canal engineered and maintained by the Inca Empire, and you access it on a very strict rotation. If your turn's at dawn, enjoy your frozen hands. If your turn's at midday, say hi to algae, and even after hauling it back uphill in clay pots that do not appreciate uneven paths, this water is still not safe. It looks clean, it smells clean, but it whispers secrets of amoebas and parasites into your digestive tract. You boil it when you can, if you have time. If not, you drink and pray your ancestors are in a forgiving mood. You've heard stories unconfirmed, whispered by the wind of entire families taken out by stomach demons, which we, in the modern world, might identify as cholera, giardia, or a particularly vengeful strain of E. coli. Historians still argue whether Inca boiling rituals were widely practiced hygiene techniques or spiritual customs conveniently aligned with germ defense. Either way, the toilet situation makes you wish for reincarnation as a cactus. Which brings us to bathing. Ah yes, the luxury of being marginally less filthy for 3 to 5 minutes per moon cycle. Bathing happens rarely and usually in frigid conditions, since warm water is a privilege reserved for the emperor, or at least someone with a household llama count above 10. You strip down beside a stream, teeth chattering, pouring handfuls of icy splash onto skin that has forgotten what touch feels like. But there's a catch. Bathing too often is considered risky. People say it opens the pores and lets evil spirits or just more disease slink in. Better to keep your skin sealed beneath layers of spiritual grime. Soap, sort of. A paste of crushed quinoa and herbs, which feels like exfoliating with porridge and smells like a salad regretting its life choices. Don't even get started on communal baths. They exist in some villages, usually ceremonial, but stepping into one is like jumping into a live debate between good hygiene and bad decisions. You come out wetter. Yes. Cleaner, that's subjective. Then there's the rain. Sometimes, the heavens gift you a sudden downpour, and for 10 glorious minutes, the entire village turns into a naked blur of flailing limbs, buckets and laughter. Rain bathing is a sport, an event, a chance to scrub under your arms and shout into the void before the sun creeps back and turns the mud path into a slippery luge of shame. Your water is also your cook. Every pot of chuño stew or quinoa mush begins with your hands dipping into that same community supply. If someone upstream decided to wash a particularly pungent gourd or dunk a foot in for luck, congratulations, you're tasting it. And when your water runs out, you hike. You hike down steep paths with a clay jar bouncing against your hip. You scoop. You hike back, all to fill a cooking pot and maybe rinse your face. Water is work. Water is risk. Water is life, if life were more emotionally manipulative. One elder insists he can divine the health of the whole village just by looking at the communal basin at dusk. If it glistens, we live, he says. If it's cloudy, don't eat dinner. You laugh nervously, then proceed to eat anyway, because hunger doesn't care about turbidity. So yes, the mountain offers water, but never for free. It demands sore shoulders, constant calculation, and a stomach strong enough to gamble on microbial roulette. You live with it, you even thank it, but you never trust it. And when night falls and your throat feels parched, and there's a faint trickle outside your stone hut, you hesitate. Then you sip. Then you whisper your regrets to the stars. Wind down begins. And now, with your clay jug set down beside you and the mountain air quiet at last, your breath begins to slow. The wind no longer bites, it hums. That stream you feared just hours ago now lulls like a lullaby, and every aching part of your body begins to loosen, like threads unwinding from a woven tunic. The stars blink above your home like ancient signals, steady and distant, in this world of cold terraces and fickle skies. You made it through another day, one measured not in hours, but in rituals, in effort, in simple endurance. Let that comfort settle deep into your chest. You don't need to boil any more water tonight. You don't need to hike. Just lie back. Feel the earth beneath you and let the chill drift quietly into dream. Hey guys, tonight we time travel to a place where the altitude steals your breath faster than your responsibilities do. Welcome to a mountain terrace village deep in the Inca Empire. You just woke up at about 11,000 feet above sea level, which is a fun way of saying no. You can't breathe, your lungs are staging a mutiny, and your joints have filed a formal complaint against the cold. Your bed is a stretched-out llama-hide that smells like Tuesday's stew, placed on top of carved stones that still somehow manage to feel lumpy. You share this masterpiece of comfort with your entire family, grandparents, cousins, a few chickens, and inexplicably, a guinea pig that no one remembers inviting. The good news: you're alive. The bad news: so are 70 mosquitoes huddled in the corner, waiting for their turn at your ankles. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You try to sit up, but your head spins, thanks to the thin mountain air and last night's fermented maize beverage. Someone's already stoking the morning fire, which means the one corner of the room is briefly warmer than the rest. The smoke gathers near the ceiling, so you crouch under it like a squinting llama, trying not to cough your soul out. Your body aches from sleeping on stone, but hey, at least there aren't fleas the size of thumbnails anymore. That was last week's crisis. The hut is made of neatly stacked stones without mortar. It looks like it could withstand an earthquake, but couldn't stop the morning wind from coming in sideways and whispering all your regrets back to you. The roof is thatched ichu grass, which is great for drainage and terrible for staying dry if someone forgets to patch the holes. You're pretty sure that drip over your head isn't condensation, it's the mountain weeping for you. You glance at the single niche carved into the wall. It holds a few prized things: your mama's spindle, an idol of Inti, the sun god, and a small pouch of coca leaves for later, dental emergencies. The floor is tamped earth, swept daily with a broom made from shrub branches, which honestly does nothing except rearrange the dust. There's no door, just a cloth draped over the entrance, stiff with last month's cold. You're hungry, but you're not moving fast. The elevation means every step feels like you're dragging a full-sized stone block, which the Inca called exercise. You can hear distant voices, someone's calling for water, someone's feeding the llamas, and a child is crying because, well, it's cold, and they're 5. Welcome to the Inca version of a Monday morning. Outside, you can see the terrace fields stepping down the mountainside like ancient spreadsheets carved by stubborn gods. Each one is held up by a stone retaining wall so precisely engineered that modern archaeologists are still frowning at them suspiciously. Historians still argue whether the average villager knew the math behind those walls or just followed orders and hoped they didn't collapse. The sun is peeking out, which means it's time to salute Inti with a murmured prayer and not much else. You grab your tunic, which is mostly clean. If by clean, you mean dusted by air. There's no concept of wardrobe rotation, you wear what you have. And if it gets wet, you just become one with the cold until further notice. Your day hasn't even started yet, and already your body is negotiating for early retirement. But no, you have chores, you have expectations, and you have at least one more fainting spell before breakfast. Breathe in. Or try to. There's no oxygen, only duty. You shuffle toward the doorway, ducking beneath the brittle grass curtain as if you're exiting a royal suite, which, in a way, you are. If royalty slept next to drying corn and guinea pig droppings, the sun is awake now, glaring at you from between two jagged peaks. At this altitude, it doesn't shine, it stabs. And your skin, already wind-battered and sun-cracked, accepts this daily punishment like an unpaid intern hoping for exposure. The morning routine begins with not dying. Your first mission, check the sleeping quarters for signs of frostbite, animal droppings, or that one snake who insists this is his corner now. Your second mission, wake everyone else, which is mostly achieved through coughing theatrically and stepping on the creaky floor in an exaggerated loop. Breakfast is theoretically happening soon. But first, water. You grab the ceramic jug still damp from yesterday's refill and head off to the nearest irrigation canal. It's technically a marvel of engineering, channeling glacial runoff through hundreds of kilometers. It's also ice cold, full of sediment, and, depending on which neighbor washed their tunic upstream last night, potentially flavored. Your hands turn red as you fill the jug, the water stinging like regret and reminding you that the Andes don't care about your comfort. Back home, your grandmother is already flattening potatoes with the same stone she once used on a Spanish soldier's knee. The breakfast spread is modest boiled potatoes again, a bit of maize porridge, and, if the gods are generous, a smudge of llama fat. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring it, your jaw's just still waking up. Food here doesn't delight the palate, it humbles it. You don't eat because you want to. You eat because chewing keeps you warm. Historians still argue whether the average Inca villager actually liked this diet or simply survived on it. There are records of elaborate feasts for the elite. But out here in the mountain terraces, if you see a new vegetable, it's a festival. If you taste salt, you assume you're hallucinating. Once fed, it's time to tend the terraced fields. You slip on your sandals woven from llama-hide, blessedly pliable, but still unable to protect you from sharp stones, insect bites, and philosophical thoughts about blisters. You carry your foot plow, which looks like a giant wooden spoon that dreams of being useful, and join your neighbors who are already halfway down the slope. Terracing is a genius invention, a kind of agricultural origami that lets you grow crops on a vertical cliff face. But it's also exhausting. You climb down stone steps so steep they might as well be a punishment for pride. You kneel in the dirt, planting or weeding or replanting, and your back begins composing its own funeral song. Every movement is deliberate. There is no wasted gesture. Even breathing must be done efficiently, or you'll pass out into a potato patch and wake up being mistaken for fertilizer. You notice the silence. No metal clinks, no engines, just the wind threading through grass, the low coo of a distant alpaca, and the occasional grunt from a neighbor who's just remembered how old their knees are. Your body begins to settle into the rhythm dig. Drop, pat, dig, drop, pat. It's almost meditative. If you ignore the burning thighs, the wheezing lungs, and the sun slowly setting fire to your shoulders, there's a moment, just one, where the wind shifts and you see the valley below. It's green, despite the altitude. The terraces curve around the mountain like ribs on a giant stone beast. You think maybe this is beautiful. Then a beetle crawls into your tunic and you're back to reality. Your midday meal is brought down by a child who looks 10 but probably works like he's 30. He hands you a pouch of toasted corn and you offer him a smile that says, "I'm still alive." Barely. He shrugs. That's the standard here. You eat in silence. Chew. Swallow. Chew. Wonder if maybe, just maybe, you'll dream about mangoes tonight, or sugar, or even something absurd like a sandwich. But no. Reality is maze. Maze forever. Maze in the morning, maze at night, maze until you forget what food used to be. And just like that, the afternoon wind begins to pick up. Time to gather tools, say a quick prayer to Pachamama, and hike back up. It's not a sprint, it's not even a walk. It's more like a slow, noble crawl of someone whose calves gave up 4 terraces ago. At the top, you collapse by the fire pit. A neighbor tosses you a coca leaf, and you tuck it between cheek and gum, letting the mild numbness spread. It doesn't fix the pain, but it blurs it enough that you can pretend you'll wake up tomorrow feeling fresh. You won't. You're up again. Because nature doesn't ask permission. And unfortunately, Inca mountain terraces didn't come with indoor plumbing or privacy clauses. So you step into the pail, Pre-dawn cold, your bladder full and your dignity already packed up and gone. Let's talk toilets or the lack of them. There's no ceramic throne waiting behind a wooden door. There's just you. A clay pot if you're lucky, a far-off shrub, and your most practiced squatting stance. You aim for the edge of the terrace, the official spot designated by consensus and slight wind advantage. Everyone uses it, everyone pretends they don't. Toilets, in this world, are less of a structure and more of a concept. It's a social experiment meets public ritual, where the goal is to evacuate discreetly while simultaneously acting like you've just gone to inspect a rock. There's a method to it: scan the slope for snakes, squat low enough to avoid splashback, pray the wind is merciful. And when you're done, there's no flush, no soft tissue. There's a leaf, if it hasn't been used already. There's a stick, if you're feeling brave. And there's the classic air dry and hope for the best. Historians still argue whether Inca hygiene practices were better or worse than their European contemporaries. On one hand, they did have aqueducts and basic sanitation awareness. On the other hand, you're pretty sure someone just tripped into a compost heap of last week's offerings. And the phrase waste management here basically translates to just go downhill. Now, as a peasant villager, your job isn't just to defecate and forget. You also get to maintain the latrine pits, yes, plural, because each household or work group maintains its own pile of dignity erosion. With a woven basket and a brave nose, you gather yesterday's deposits and mix them into the soil far from food crops. It's not fun, but hey, at least you're contributing to agricultural sustainability. Who said poop can't be patriotic? The nobles. Of course, don't do this. No, their relieving stations are actual outhouse-like chambers tucked into compound corners, complete with drainage ditches and privacy screens made of reeds. Still not 5-star, but in the land of exposed buttocks and slippery stones. That counts as luxury. Let's not forget the ceremonial side of it either. If you're lucky or unlucky enough to be selected for a purification ritual, you're expected to fast, drink herbal concoctions, and yes, purge, extensively, in public, while being observed for spiritual reasons. You begin to suspect that the gods really enjoy watching people suffer through awkward bodily functions. Cold irony at its finest. And just when you think you've got the rhythm of it, morning squat, midday holding contest, and moonlight emergencies, something changes. Maybe it's festival week, maybe it's the wet season. Suddenly, the bushes are occupied, the rocks are slippery, and someone's dog has claimed your usual spot. Nature becomes a turf war, and everyone loses. There's a running joke in the village that the best way to stay regular is fear. Fear of slipping, fear of being seen, fear of that one rooster who seems personally offended by your presence. It's a motivational system wrapped in feathers and feces. You begin to miss toilet paper, a thing you've never actually seen, but dream about anyway. In its place, corn husks, smooth river stones, your left hand, and a silent prayer that no one ever shakes it. It's a time-honored routine passed down by generations who didn't have the luxury of shaman. At sunset, when the air grows colder and the clouds roll over the peaks like silent judgment, the final bathroom run becomes a communal event. People head out in pairs, speaking softly, carrying bundles of leaves and glancing around as if they're entering enemy territory. You go too, because not going means waking up at 2 a.m. and trying to aim by starlight. Back at your stone house, the fire's still glowing. You warm your fingers and reflect on a day of basic bodily betrayal. You didn't fall. You didn't freeze. You only stepped in something once. That counts as success. The gods may demand offerings of corn and coca leaves, but you suspect they're just as interested in what the villagers leave behind. Somewhere, in the ancient annals of forgotten Andean lore, is a tale about the first person who figured out where to go when there was nowhere to go. And you, modern time traveler, squat warrior, reluctant fertilizer manager, are keeping that sacred tradition alive. Now sleep, if you can, because tomorrow is bean stew night. You wake to the bubbling sound of a pot over fire and the unmistakable aroma of disappointment. Breakfast is served, and it's exactly what you feared: chuño porridge. Chuño, for the uninitiated, is freeze-dried potato made by leaving spuds out overnight in the frosty highland air. and then stomping them flat with your bare, preferably already numb feet. It's the Inca equivalent of meal prepping if meal prepping meant spiritually punishing your taste buds before the sun even rises. You don't choose the food chooses you, and sometimes it chooses to remind you that you're living 3,000 meters above sea level and flavor doesn't survive up here. A traditional Inca diet revolves around what the land begrudgingly allows. Maize is sacred, but scarce this high up, so you rely on hardy crops like quinoa, potatoes, and oca, a tuber that looks like it lost a fight with a carrot. Your favorite dish, the one you're not eating right now. Because meat, that's a festival treat, or a sacrifice. Mostly a sacrifice. Guinea pigs called cuy are the elite protein around here. And yes, they're adorable. But they're also deliciously crispy after 2 hours over a clay oven. Historians still argue whether cuy was more of a food staple or ceremonial delicacy. You just argue whether you're hungry enough to ignore the eyes still attached. Lunch and dinner aren't much different. A few boiled greens, a ladle of thick soup, and maybe a tiny helping of llama jerky called scratchy if you're particularly lucky, or someone else was particularly unlucky. Jerky is great, it's dry, it's salty, and it's about as chewy as a sandal. Actually, in a blind taste test, you probably couldn't tell them apart. Drinks, oh, you mean chicha fermented maize beer, served lukewarm in communal gourds, slightly sour, and possibly chewed before brewing. Yes, chewed. Some versions of chicha require the enzymes in human saliva to kickstart fermentation. So women, typically the brewers, mash corn in their mouths, spit it out, and call it tradition. You pretend you didn't hear that part because water, as previously mentioned, is not always safe. And your choices are spit beer or diarrhea roulette. Meal times are brief. You eat quickly, mostly in silence, seated on the packed dirt floor. No forks, no napkins, no tablecloths embroidered with golden thread, just a carved wooden spoon. If you're lucky, your hands. If you're not, and always the ever-present grit of ash in your teeth. Because the kitchen is also the fire pit, and smoke filter is not a concept anyone's gotten around to inventing. Occasionally, you chew coca leaves not to get high, but to fight altitude sickness, hunger, and the general existential malaise of being trapped on a mountainside with no pizza delivery. It doesn't cure any of these things, but it makes you care slightly less about them, which is almost the same. The elites, of course, dine differently. They get maize, actual spices, roasted meat on ceremonial platters. Their food is arranged, yours is deposited. Nobles eat with dignity. You eat like someone who lost a bet with a root vegetable. Historians believe food was a strong symbol of hierarchy in the Inca Empire. You believe food is a strong symbol of sadness. One quirky tidbit on special occasions. You'll help prepare a dish involving hot stones stuffed inside an animal carcass to cook it from the inside out. It's like a reverse microwave with a side of culinary danger. You burn your fingers every time. But hey, it's tradition. When it's time to store food, the Inca terrace villages shine. You've got colcas, those cool, dry storage huts where food is kept for times of famine or tribute. They're impressively engineered, climate-controlled by nature, and stacked like mini-grain fortresses. But you're not allowed to touch them unless someone tells you to. And someone always tells you not to. So you eat what's available, which is usually what's left, and you learn to be grateful for the calories, even if half of them taste like dirt and despair. Because hunger isn't a novelty, it's a companion. It follows you between meals, grumbles during rituals, and waits patiently in the corners of your mind like a particularly rude ghost. As night falls and your stomach growls in protest, you remember that food in this world isn't about pleasure. It's about survival. And survival is a flavor that never goes out of style. No matter how bland it tastes, you scratch your shoulder again. The itch isn't going away. In fact, it's not even new. It's just eternal. You live in wool, not the kind from modern sweaters that feels soft and fuzzy, but the kind made from hand-spun, unwashed alpaca fibers that still remember the alpaca. The fibers are rough, oily, unbleached, and haven't seen a bath since they were sheared, meaning they cling to your skin like a scratchy curse. You have one tunic. One. It's been with you through every season. Every storm, every ritual, every bad harvest, and every unfortunate gastrointestinal decision. There's no laundry day because there's no soap, no wash basin, and no time. You occasionally rinse it in a cold river when it becomes so stiff with dirt it could stand up by itself and apply for citizenship. Lice live in the seams. Fleas camp out under the armpits like it's a 24/7 music festival. You try not to think about it. You scratch again. Sandals? Technically, yes. They're made of woven plant fiber or llama leather if you're lucky. But sandals might be too generous a word for something that provides all the arch support of a fruit peel and lasts about as long. The Inca trails are stone and gravel. Your feet are perpetually bruised, cut and weirdly shaped, sort of like someone tried to sculpt feet out of cornmeal and then forgot what toes were supposed to do. There are no undergarments. You just hope for the best. Your woven belt is practical, it keeps your tunic wrapped around your body and, in theory, can be used to carry tools or food. But more often, it just digs into your hips because one size fits none. The cold is a constant, even with all the wool. You shiver through the Andean nights. The mountains don't care about your fashion choices. In winter, your breath fogs up in the air before it even leaves your nostrils. The wind sneaks in through the holes in your fabric like it's trying to borrow your soul. And then it rains, which turns your already heavy tunic into a soggy alpaca sponge that smells like moldy hay and broken dreams. Once wet, it takes roughly one full revolution of the sun to dry, assuming you don't wear it again first. Which of course you do. You might get a llama cloak if you're important. Or at least if your grandmother likes you. But most of the time, layering just means wrapping yourself in increasingly damp, smelly wool. Fashion Week in Cusco. This is not, historically. Inca textiles were incredibly sophisticated. The upper classes wore vibrant colors and patterns that showed their rank and family lineage. But you wear the kind of earth tones that come from literally falling into earth. You're a walking mud sample. Historians still argue whether commoners dyed their clothes at all, or if the color palette was just whatever shade of dust came free with the fabric. A fun fringe fact: high-ranking Inca nobles sometimes wore tunics so fine that Spaniards mistook them for silk. Yours feels like it was woven by an angry hedgehog. With talons, at festivals, you might try to clean up a bit. Rub some clay on your face, comb your hair with a fishbone. Try not to smell like fermented corn. But you're not fooling anyone. The shaman still sprinkles you with llama fat for purification. And you still look like you were dragged backwards through a llama. You scratch again. The lice are having a party. You're not invited. But you're definitely the venue. You try to smile. But it hurts. Not just metaphorically, your gums are swollen, a molar is throbbing, and there's a metallic taste in your mouth that feels like regret and early death. You are a proud resident of an Inca mountain village. But dentistry, tragically, did not make the climb with you. Toothbrush. That's adorable. You chew on a stick sometimes. It's vaguely minty if you're lucky and mildly poisonous if you're not. But don't worry either way. The bacteria stay. Toothpaste hasn't been invented, and the closest you come to dental hygiene is rinsing your mouth with cold river water, which may or may not contain the last rites of a sacrificed guinea pig. There are no dentists, at least not in the spa-scented, Novocaine having scents you might be hoping for. If your tooth gets unbearable, someone, usually a village elder with shaking hands and a bone chisel, will help by yanking it out. With no anesthetic, unless you count screaming as a form of anesthesia, in which case, you're covered. Some Inca skulls show evidence of trepanation holes carefully carved into the skull for medical or ritual purposes. Historians still argue whether this was to release spirits, pressure, or just boredom on a slow Thursday. But one thing's clear: if that level of cranial confidence existed, you can imagine what they thought pulling teeth with a rock and a prayer felt like. Probably better than leaving it in. You can't chew well anymore. Not that there's much to chew. Remember that hard, dried maize you ate for lunch? Yeah, your molars remember too, and they're holding a grudge. Sometimes, when you bite into something, it feels like a tiny lightning storm in your jaw, followed by the dull realization that chewing was a mistake. Let's not even talk about cavities. Or maybe we should, because you have plenty. A fringe tidbit, some concubines were assigned roles not just in entertainment or companionship, but as dream interpreters. Yes, dream interpreters. You begin wondering if your dream last night, falling endlessly into a vat of honey while birds shouted your name, was worth mentioning. Probably not. Lunchtime arrives, not with bells, but with silence. You sit in rows on thin cushions and eat lentils and bread. The bread is so stale it could double as self-defense equipment. You chew carefully. Once a girl cracked a tooth. She's now in the embroidery unit, less talking there. Later, your invited reed ordered to assist the Valide Sultan's steward. You carry a tray of sugared dates and pretend not to notice the gold threadwork on her pillows. You're not sure if you're being noticed, tested, or ignored, but you know better than to guess out loud. Someone sneezes. No one says bless you. Back in your quarters, you stare at the tiny window just big enough to let in daylight. Not freedom. A sparrow perches there for a moment. It blinks at you, tilts its head, and leaves. That was your entire social interaction for the day. You wake up again, this time to bells, not the musical kind. These are the brass clappers of structure, of schedule, of someone far above you needing someone far below them to start preparing breakfast. Spoiler, that's you. But before breakfast, there's teeth. Not your teeth. Mind you, those are on your own time. Today, you're assigned to the grooming chamber, brushing the teeth of someone who eats sugared figs for leisure and believes dental hygiene is a spiritual metaphor. You hold a chewed twig, called a miswak, and gently scrape with the rhythm of someone pretending this is a normal job. Because here, the woman you're assigned to is half asleep and wholly unimpressed. Her lips don't part unless you chant a line of poetry first. Apparently, cleanliness is next to poetry in the harem's long list of unspoken commandments. Once you've brushed another person's molars with enough poetic tact to avoid punishment, you're rewarded with your own breakfast thin soup. Sometimes it's lentils, sometimes rice, sometimes the vague taste of boiled expectation. You're allowed to sit, but only in formation, legs tucked, backs straight, chewing like you're being evaluated on grace per bite. One historical fact: harem women weren't just pampered ornaments. Many were deeply literate, educated in Arabic, Persian, Turkish, and sometimes Greek. In fact, some could quote Rumi faster than most men in the empire. You're learning slowly. Today's lesson is that obedience rhymes with silence more often than not. Mid-morning, you're in the sewing room. Not everyone sews. Some stitch, some bead. You thread fine silk into coarse linen with eyes that have adjusted to both luxury and frugality. The elder matron oversees, correcting posture more often than technique. You're not just sewing, she says. You're learning to arrange time. You're also learning the secret social rules of gossip. Speak too little, you're cold. Speak too much, you're doomed. Speak at the right moment with the wrong tone. You'll learn how fast banishment to the mending pile happens. By midday, you're translating poems into embroidery. Gold thread for verbs, crimson for nouns, blue for forbidden meanings. There's no emoji here, but stitch placement is basically texting with silk, the fringe tidbit. Some of these designs hide names, coded messages stitched into collars, into pillow seams, into belts, love letters with no return address. You glance out a window well. Not a window, a screen of carved wood. It lets in filtered light and filtered air and filtered hope. You see shadows move beyond it, but you don't see the world, only the outline of its permission. Lunch and another round of warm softness served in hard silence. This time it's chickpeas and flatbread. The chickpeas are decent, but the bread could challenge a bronze coin in a wrestling match. Afternoon is music practice. No, not for you. You're here to hold the strings of a tanbur while another girl learns fingering from a grumpy music tutor. Your job is to adjust the strings, refill the incense, and never ever comment on pitch. There's a brief moment when someone hums a lullaby from the outer provinces. You recognize the dialect, and for a second, you remember a world outside the marble. Then it's gone. One girl sneezes, someone else coughs, and reality takes back control. Historians still argue whether music practice was truly recreation or just another method of compliance training disguised as culture. Back in your quarters, you're given a sheet of paper. Blank, You're told to copy a page of court poetry. Not read, not compose, just copy. Line after line of metaphors you don't yet understand but are still expected to memorize. You finish just as the oil lamp flickers out. Night never really falls in the harem, it softens. The stone walls glow faintly with oil lamps. Shadows stretch, candlelight flickers on bronze trays, and someone plays a harp-like instrument far too delicately to bring comfort. It's the kind of evening where the air feels like it's listening, and every footstep echoes like a secret being past. You're summoned again, this time to assist in dressing one of the favorites, the Sultan's favored consort, for the evening court. You don't walk, you glide. Well, you try to glide, because tripping over the edge of someone else's silk gown is a quick way to get reassigned to laundering outerwear, which, by the way, is done by hand in cold water with soap that smells like regret. Tonight's ensemble includes 6 layers of fabric, embroidered with enough gold thread to bankrupt a small town. Your role is to tie the belt, just the belt, but not too tight, not too loose, and not with the wrong knot. There is a correct knot. It's traditional, sacred, possibly invented to punish left-handed people. As you adjust the final pleat, she speaks to you not with words, but with a look, the kind of look that says, "You are invisible but vital." It's oddly comforting, like being a ghost with administrative duties. You return to your own quarters in silence. Dinner is cold by now. Leftovers of lentils and a mysterious paste that no one dares name. You eat slowly because there's not much to rush toward. Then come the stories. One girl recites tales from the Book of Kings. Another hums a folktale from the mountains. You take turns pretending to be entertained. One of them jokes about slipping out dressed as a eunuch. Everyone laughs, but no one laughs hard, because they all know someone who tried it and didn't return. A fringe fact. The harem wasn't only a place for consorts and concubines, it was also a political school, especially for the mothers of princes, many of whom ended up wielding enormous behind-the-scenes power. Think PTA meeting. But everyone has a personal musician and a spy network. You wash your hands at the communal basin. The water is cool and scented faintly with rose, not because anyone's pampering you, but because if it weren't, the pipes would smell like boiled sandals. Sleep preparation is a ritual. Hair braided, nails checked, bed mats straightened, you lie down with 4 others in the same room. No windows, just a ceiling painted to resemble stars. You stare up, letting the soft, flaking gold leaf trick your brain into believing in constellations. Just before sleep, an older woman begins to chant. It's not a lullaby. It's a protective prayer. You don't believe in its power, but you also don't risk skipping it. Not because of superstition, but because routine is the only rebellion you're allowed. The night is not silent. You hear the murmurs of footsteps, keys turning, distant doors clicking open and shut. The palace breathes, and you, small part that you are, inhale when it lets you. Historians still argue whether the women of the harem were prisoners or power brokers, trapped in silk or armed with it. The truth, as always, depends on where you were standing, or in your case, kneeling, stitching, translating, and dreaming behind a carved wooden screen. You wake not to birdsong, but to the measured thud of wooden sandals and the faint hiss of fabric being swept across stone. Morning isn't announced here, it creeps in, careful not to disturb anyone too important. You rise with the discipline of someone who no longer expects rest to be restful. Today, you're scheduled for literacy lessons. Yes, school, because the Ottoman harem, unlike your assumptions, isn't just for reclining in embroidered gowns while nibbling dates. It's a training ground, and you, like many others, are expected to know Persian poetry, Arabic calligraphy, and the difference between flattering a vizier and insulting his beard. You sit on a cushion in a circle with others. A eunuch tutor reads a passage from Rumi, his voice steady, rhythmic, hypnotic. You copy the script, your reed pen catching on the parchment's grain. You blink too long and get tapped with a fan. Not hard, just enough to remind you that dozing off mid-metaphor is not how you climb the ladder. Quill down, lessons done, and you shuffle back through a corridor so narrow it feels like it's trying to remember you. You pass the sewing room today. It's filled with chatter about the Sultan's dream. Apparently, He saw a black horse, a broken mirror, and a blue bird. Interpretations vary wildly. One woman whispers that it means a new concubine will arrive soon. Another says it means war. A third just rolls her eyes and mutters something about indigestion. There's a library. By the way, a real one. Tucked behind a set of double doors only opened on even-numbered days. You've seen it once. Shelves stacked high with illuminated manuscripts, charts of the stars, medical texts, and ancient legends that seem more dream than doctrine. You once read about a woman who memorized all 114 surahs of the Quran and earned the ear of the Sultan. No one knows if that's true, but it's repeated often. Like a bedtime spell you hope will stick. Fringe fact of the day, the harem included women from across the Empire: Greek, Circassian, Albanian, Georgian, forming a linguistic soup that made gossip both dangerous and delicious. One wrong translation, and your friendship bracelet turns into evidence. You help translate a letter today. One of the elder women needs it sent discreetly to her cousin outside the palace. You're not supposed to help, but your handwriting is prettier. She rewards you with a silk ribbon worn. Yes, but yours now. Ownership is rare, treasured. At dusk, a physician visits. Not for you, of course. One of the girls has a rash on her hands. The doctor, an old man with a beard like trailing moss, prescribes mashed almonds mixed with rosewater. You're not sure if this will help, but it smells nice, which is almost the same thing. You retire to the bathing chamber. Not a bath, mind you, just a warm cloth and a brass bowl. Privacy is limited, but modesty is preserved by layers of etiquette thicker than your winter shawl. Historians still argue whether education in the harem empowered women or merely refined their obedience. The lesson plans are clear, the intentions less so. Back in your room, you roll the new silk ribbon between your fingers, a treasure, a bribe, a bookmark for a dream you're not allowed to write down. You wake to soft laughter echoing through the corridor. Not your laughter, of course someone else's. Somewhere, someone's status has shifted, and the hierarchy of the harem subtly tilts again. You're used to it by now. Power here doesn't come with armor or crowns. It comes in whispers and silences. Today is Labor Day. No, not the modern 3-day weekend kind. The kind where you and a dozen other women scrub mosaic floors with stiff bristled brushes, soapy water, and enough elbow grease to polish an empire. Your fingernails are already half gone, and your knees will not forgive you. But the tiles, yes, they shine. And when a senior eunuch glides past, he nods in approval. A nod is good. A nod means you might avoid extra night duty. Laundry comes next. Not with detergent, no such luxury. You beat the garments clean against flat river stones in the courtyard basin, humming to yourself to pass the time. You rinse silk under cold water that smells faintly of copper and stories. One of the girls claims the towels used to belong to a previous queen. She doesn't say what happened to her. You don't ask. Then it's time for weaving. You sit at a wooden loom with the rest of your shift, pulling thread with mechanical patience. You're not just making cloth, you're making tribute. Some of these pieces will be gifts, others, bribes. The Sultan might never touch them. Doesn't matter, the act of making them matters. There's a rumor that a consort once wove an image of herself into a rug pattern, then had it delivered to the Sultan's mother. Whether this is true or just a bedtime ghost story depends on who you ask, but the implication remains the loom is a political tool, and you're threading your way into a future that might include a window, or at least a door that doesn't lock from the outside. Your hands hurt by mid-afternoon. You switch tasks, embroidery now. Gold thread, real gold. It tangles easily, catches in your cuticles, and makes your fingers feel like they've been dipped in static. You embroider tulips' imperial symbols of spring and balance. No one mentions that tulip bulbs were once traded like currency. A weird little Ottoman bubble economy, based entirely on flowers. And yet, you stitch. Historians still argue whether this daily labor was genuine productivity or ceremonial busywork. But your arms don't care about that. They're too sore to debate. At sunset, a garden walk. This is not optional, it's scheduled relaxation. You're meant to absorb beauty, reflect. Appear peaceful, there are peacocks, literal ones, with tail feathers that fan like royal proclamations. You pretend you don't envy them, but you do. As night falls, someone plays the oud in a neighboring wing. The notes drift into your chamber like old perfume. You lie back, sore, so sore. Your palms are blistered and your spine has formed a permanent question mark. But your tulips are flawless, and someone said your rug will be seen by the Valide Sultan herself. And that, in this world, is something like winning the lottery. If lotteries involved needles and high-stakes politicking via throw pillows, you wake up the next morning with a cold wind slipping beneath your blanket, if you can even call this sheet of woven cotton a blanket. The harem, for all its gilded arches and mosaic glory, is not immune to the weather. Today, the air has a cruel bite, and your breath fogs like smoke. You pull your robe tighter and shuffle toward the brazier, which, surprise, is already claimed by the favored few. So you do what the less favored always do. Rub your arms, bounce on your heels, and pretend you're not cold. Ottoman Istanbul doesn't care about your comfort. The summers are a furnace, and the winters are a grudge match. There's no air conditioning, of course, but worse, no insulation. Stone walls suck the heat out of your bones, and the high ceilings ensure that what warmth there is rises just out of reach, mocking you. Summer is no relief either. You swap icy breath for sweat-soaked garments. Your linen sticks to your back, and the scent of dozens of other sweating women rises like incense no one asked for. Fans are rare, usually symbolic. Someone once made a giant ostrich feather fan for a sultan's favorite concubine. You, in contrast, get a palm frond and a tired wrist. Bugs. Oh, yes. Mosquitoes, especially like tiny flying tax collectors. They take blood without permission. You swat them away in your sleep and wake up looking like you've lost a fight with a tiny, angry artist who only uses red. Some women swear by garlic rubbed on the skin. Others use old clove oil. You just scratch and grumble. Rainy season brings its own miseries. The courtyard becomes a slip hazard. Your slippers, thin-soled leather things that wouldn't survive a modern sidewalk, soak through instantly. You shuffle through puddles like a waterlogged ghost, trying not to slide and fall in front of someone important. That happened to a girl last week. She landed right at the feet of the Chamberlain. She's still scrubbing stairs in shame. Historians still argue whether the harem had specialized seasonal wardrobes for lower-ranking women, or if the layering strategy was more survival instinct than standard issue. What's not up for debate if you're too cold or too hot? No one is coming to save you. You adapt, or you faint. Maybe both. Some of the high-ranking concubines get furs in winter. You're not one of them. You get extra socks maybe, and a communal hot water bottle, which is more ceremonial than effective. If you press it to your chest, you might trick your heart into forgetting how cold your toes are. But there are bright spots. The garden changes with the seasons, and today you notice tiny crocus buds pressing up through the earth. It means spring is near. It means fewer nights shivering under your damp sheet. It means less mildew on your wall tapestry. You breathe in the air still sharp, still cruel, and wonder if the same breeze touched the Sultan's beard this morning. Probably not. His chamber has an underfloor heating system, ancient radiant heat. You're glad someone's toes are warm. You return to your quarters, teeth chattering like tambourines, and wrap yourself in the one luxury you can afford: stillness. Not warmth, just the absence of motion. You close your eyes, imagining sun on your face, a breeze that's gentle, not judgmental. You sleep, at least in dreams. Weather is optional, but even dreams must yield to thirst. When you rise again, your mouth is dry as an old scroll, your lips cracked like a mosaic, left too long in the sun. You stumble toward the wash basin, but of course, the water jug is empty. Again. One of the other girls probably used the last of it to rinse her hair before the Sultan's inspection. You don't blame her. If your future hung on a strand of shiny hair, you'd hog the pitcher too. You pick up the empty jug, traipse down the corridor, and join the queue at the fountain. It's cold, dripping, sluggish. The copper spout trickles out something that vaguely resembles water. You fill the jug and watch as sediment dances at the bottom like ancient spirits. Clear water is a myth, or a luxury reserved for high priests and royal mouths. And yet, you drink. Because thirst doesn't negotiate. You tip the jug back, grit your teeth literally against grit and swallow. You hope this time the water doesn't fight back. Cholera, dysentery, parasites, the Ottoman harem isn't a hospital. And if you fall sick, you'll be treated with rosewater, prayers, and a firm suggestion to rest more. Historians still argue whether the harem had a dedicated healer or just relied on elderly women with opinions and cloves. Bathing is equally risky, too often avoided, too occasionally demanded. The hammam is luxurious in theory, tiled walls, steaming pools, a place to shed your dirt and burdens. In practice, you sit in steam until your pores open like the gates of a doomed city. And that's when infection marches in. Some girls swear that washing too often will kill you. Others insist it's not the washing, but the drying that gets you. You wash, carefully, reluctantly. Lather is weak, soap is rare. Hot water is hoarded like secrets. You scrub with a cloth that smells faintly of mildew and cinnamon. Don't ask. When you're done, you dry yourself with a towel that once belonged to someone else. Someone equally damp and equally hopeful. Still, the hammam is a stage. Women preen, gossips whisper. Hierarchies bloom and wither in the fog. Someone says the Sultan's new concubine drinks only boiled snow. Someone else says that's how she got a fever. You nod, say nothing, and retreat before anyone asks your opinion. You are not in the snow-drinking class. Back in your quarters, you pour the last of the water over your hands. It splashes like music. You remember how it felt to swim as a child, how clean and alive water once made you feel. Here, now it's a gamble. You win today. Maybe tomorrow it wins. Outside, rain begins. You catch a few drops on your tongue, like a gift. And you laugh quietly. Because the one time water doesn't threaten to kill you is when it falls from the sky. Now, close your eyes. Let the image of tiled domes and winding gardens fade into shadows. Let the murmurs of silk slippers in long marble halls dissolve into the hush of your own breath. The distant clink of water jugs, the whisper of linen robes, those sounds are behind you now. You are no longer bending beneath palace rules or watching droplets with suspicion. You are weightless. You are distant. You are somewhere beyond brass doors and rose-scented worry. Inhale, exhale. The stories may sleep, but they remember you. And when morning comes, they will wait in still corridors, just as you left them. Good night, and thank you for listening. Now, we drift into silk-draped shadows and echoing marble halls, where rosewater perfumes the air and footsteps are whispered on stone. You're not a visitor here, you're the newest addition. You would never think that palace life could feel like a slow-brewing trap. But that's exactly what greets you inside the harem. Gilded domes above you, rules wrapped tightly around your ankles. You're young, but not too young. And you've just been handed over as a gift wrapped in mystery. Carried far from whatever tiny village or noble court once knew your name. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive not through a royal invitation, but through negotiation, maybe even a raid or a bridal trade. One day you're fetching water, the next you're in a gilded litter with strangers speaking Ottoman Turkish, Persian and Arabic around you. The gates of Topkapi Palace rise like the mouth of a giant animal. Once you step through, you don't step back out. The first greeting, an inspection. It's not invasive, just deeply uncomfortable. You stand before eunuchs in robes, who scan you with professional detachment. Teeth, skin, body language. You're not a person here. Not yet. You're raw material, another thread in the empire's decorative human tapestry. You're asked no questions. You're given instructions. Even your name is replaced, usually by something more poetic, Gulnaz, delicate rose, or perhaps Mahidevran, moon face. Don't get attached. You are property now, and property gets renamed. They say the harem was a place of great refinement, and yes, there are cushions embroidered with gold thread, domed ceilings inlaid with turquoise tiles, and lanterns that glow like fireflies. But you're not here for the decor. You're here to be trained, or contained, possibly both. Some women arrive through tribute. Others are prisoners of war who got lucky, and others daughters of poor families, sold into a future they couldn't afford. Historians still argue whether entering the harem was a path to elevation or just an elegant trap with velvet bars. You pass rooms filled with girls in various stages of transformation. Some giggle nervously, some stare through you like you're already yesterday's shadow. A few glance up with sharp, appraising eyes calculating whether you're competition or camouflage. Spoiler, you're always competition. The floors are scrubbed clean, but there's always the faint scent of sweat behind the perfume human stories sealed into marble. You're escorted to a small shared room, barely enough space to turn around in silk. 2 others live here already. One smiles too much. The other doesn't smile at all. You're not yet assigned duties, but the routine has already started to press its hands on you. Wake early, wash in cold water, bow to those higher, ignore those lower, speak carefully, listen constantly, and absolutely never catch the eye of anyone above your station unless they ask you to. One mainstream historical fact, the imperial harem of the Ottoman Empire could house hundreds of women at once, and the system was bureaucratically intense, ranked, labeled, and monitored. A fringe tidbit. Some women were so favored that they were buried in separate mausoleums, away from their birth families, closer to the dynasty they served. Your first night. You try to sleep, curled beneath embroidered linen, staring at a ceiling that feels too high, too full of echoes. You wonder, is this the beginning of something great, or the end of who you were? The palace says nothing back. Morning, if you can call it that, arrives with a soft clang of copper trays and the rustle of too many silk feet on too little stone. You wake before sunrise because sunrise is already considered late. There's no rooster here, just the schedule. You fold your blanket, not out of choice, but because your roommate hisses at you with a warning glance the first time you forget. Nothing starts a palace morning like petty power dynamics over blanket etiquette. Your room is one of dozens tucked along a curved corridor like small, gilded boxes in a very polite hive. The air is still from the night, thick with dreams that couldn't stretch themselves fully. You try to stretch, but even your limbs seem aware they now belong to the Sultan's housekeeping ledger. Your spine creaks like a wooden stair. You are, technically, somewhere between furniture and furniture polisher. There's no breakfast in bed. There's barely breakfast. A thin rice porridge lukewarm, but at least free of beetles today. Sometimes there's a slice of dried fruit, the kind that tastes like someone else already chewed it emotionally. Water comes from a bronze pitcher, poured carefully by a girl more nervous than you. She's new. You know because she still whispers thank you to the eunuch standing in the corner. He does not reply. He is the wallpaper of your new reality. You are scheduled for instruction. You assume this will involve politics, poetry, astronomy. It does not. The first day is walking. Just walking. How to walk slowly, deliberately. Like the floor is blessed and your ankles are royalty. You take 50 steps over 4 hours. This is not exercise, it's choreography. One girl trips. That's her last session. Historians still argue whether she was reassigned or disappeared behind one of the dozens of curtains no one dares peek behind. You think surely I'm being prepared for greatness. And then you spend an hour learning how to pour coffee without making eye contact. You spend another hour watching others practice bowing. You're told to observe and not ask questions. Asking is discouraged, because knowing is dangerous. It's not that knowledge is forbidden, it's just inconvenient. During lunch, you eat alone, or together, silently. The older girls cluster in corners, speaking in code, glancing sideways. You suspect they're gossiping. About you, probably. One historical fact hierarchy in the harem was rigid. Women were ranked from newcomers, akshemi to concubines, kariye to favorites haseki, and finally to the valide sultan, the sultan's mother, who, paradoxically, ruled the roost. a quirky detail some women trained in palace etiquette for years and still never once saw the sultan's face. The floor is heated in winter, but it's early spring, so your toes alternate between sweating and freezing. You learn to stand still for long periods without shifting weight. You practice silence like it's an instrument. You even begin to miss boredom, because boredom at least felt honest. Someone passes you in the hallway and drops a handkerchief. You bend to pick it up and are immediately corrected. Never pick up anything on the floor unless told. You nod, but quietly think, what if it's a clue? A trap, a test, or just a gross piece of linen someone sneezed into? As you return to your room, you realize you've spent an entire day doing almost nothing, and yet you feel exhausted. Like your soul did cardio. You fall asleep wondering how anyone ever climbed this social ladder. Because so far, it feels more like an escalator going down. Midnight here doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the lamps. Every 20 paces, a flickering oil lamp reminds you you're awake at the pleasure of the palace, not by choice, but by schedule. You shuffle down the corridor in slippered feet that make no noise, like a well-behaved ghost. It's your turn on water duty, refilling brass pitchers, one by one, room by room, without waking anyone. This isn't a punishment. This is training in invisibility. The water jars are heavy. Each one sloshes like it resents you. Your wrist burns, but your pride has already been scrubbed out by yesterday's lessons in graceful apology. You drop a cloth once and are taught how to drop it again, this time correctly. Like a gentle sigh from a disapproving angel, you pause outside a large lacquered door, one of the restricted wings. You don't knock, obviously. You just glance at it the way one might glance at the moon, reverently, uselessly. Historians still argue whether that room belonged to the Sultan's favorite or his astrologer, or whether the favorite and the astrologer were occasionally the same person. The corridors are watched by eunuchs who move like shadows with seniority. You make eye contact once. That was your last mistake for the night. Mornings are punishment by repetition. After water duty, you get re-education, this time in storytelling, not telling, but listening. You and 12 others sit cross-legged in a semicircle while an elder woman recites tales from Shahnameh or local legends of Istanbul's founding. But here's the rule: you're not allowed to react. No gasps, no chuckles. You're learning poise under boredom. One story involves a woman who outwitted a vizier using nothing but a veil, a lemon, and a song. No one dares ask questions afterward, though every eye silently screams, what did she do with the lemon? Next, you're brought to the baths. Not for bathing, oh no. You're here to learn how to assist someone else's bath without touching their hair incorrectly. Hair, here, is sacred. Touch it wrong, and it's not just an etiquette violation, it's a diplomatic crisis in silk. One girl spills rosewater and is reassigned to laundry. You make a note, do not spill anything. Ever. You learn to fold towels like they're peace treaties. You learn that perfume is not a luxury, it's a declaration of relevance. You rub ambergris on the inner wrists of someone higher ranked than you, and pretend you're not dying inside as your own wrists smell like firewood and obligation. They packed beef strips in it, drained all moisture, then hung the meat in linen pouches until it turned to stone. You chew for hours, and the meat never gives in. It's beef-flavored granite. Still, it beats hakal, if barely. Historians still argue whether natron-preserved foods were daily staples or reserved for temple offerings and high-ranking households. What's not in question is the texture. Somewhere between leather and irony, you move to the side room, where a bundle of fish has been salted and buried under reeds for several weeks. This is lutefisk's grand ancestor. The preservation logic remove everything edible until only memory remains. Later, Scandinavians would soak this in lye to complete the culinary trauma. But we'll get to that. A woman pours vinegar over a jar of boiled eggs, sealing them in a brine that could double as industrial cleaner. These are your snacks now. Tangy, rubbery, suspiciously translucent. The eggs are watching you. Don't blink. Quirky tidbit in some parts of ancient Egypt. Meat and bread were coated with clay and tossed into fire pits, cooked and preserved simultaneously. Once the outer shell was cracked open, the inside remained surprisingly moist, like a culinary geode of desperation. A child passes you a bowl of aged barley paste. It's fermented, chunky, and vaguely alive. You smile, you nod, you die inside. But you eat it anyway. Because starvation's worse, and social faux pas even more so. The wind howls through the cracks in the Scandinavian hut. You wrap yourself in wool and reach for a preserved cheese wheel that hasn't been touched since the last winter frost. It's got the consistency of candle wax and the smell of old socks. Historians still debate whether this was ever meant to be eaten or merely used as a weapon during long, hungry sieges. One bite and you swear you've unlocked a memory from a past life. Possibly as a goat. Possibly as a victim. Everything smells like smoke, salt and thyme. Your teeth ache from gnawing, your stomach is confused, and your taste buds have officially filed a grievance with the Historical Commission. But congratulations, you've now survived the 4th course of pre-refrigeration nightmare fuel. Bon appetit. Now we plunge deeper into the delicate art of when in doubt, just bury it and hope for the best. Welcome to the realm of Egyptian grain silos and Scandinavian ice pits, aka nature's least reliable refrigerators. You start your morning in a Nile-side village, where the sun rises early and so does everyone else, because the bread won't preserve itself. You shuffle over to the grain silo, a giant clay structure that somehow resembles a beehive and a pizza oven had a child. Inside, it's warm, dry, and smells like dusty ambition. This is where wheat and barley are stored, supposedly safe from rodents, moisture, and karma. The preservation trick, airtight layers of packed mud, reed baskets, and a little bit of denial. Grain is life after all, and if it goes bad, so does the entire village. You grab a handful and chew a raw barley kernel. It cracks like sand in your teeth. Nutritious. Technically. Tasty. Let's just say your mouth is now an exfoliating spa. Historians still argue whether Egyptians developed grain preservation on their own or borrowed techniques from Mesopotamia. Either way, it's impressive for a civilization that also used crocodile dung as contraceptive paste. Innovation has many faces. Up north, in the frozen wilds of early Scandinavia, the approach is more rustic. Imagine a deer carcass, gutted and wrapped in birch bark, lowered into a hole in the permafrost. Voila meat locker. The only challenge remembering where you buried it and hoping it's not already claimed by a bear with an equally strong sense of tradition. You take a walk through a Norse settlement. There's salted fish hanging from the rafters like pungent laundry. Barrels of pickled vegetables fermenting with all the enthusiasm of a science fair volcano. And a vat of soured milk that might once have been yogurt. Or possibly an eldritch horror. It bubbles ominously, but nobody bats an eye. You taste a spoonful. Congratulations. You've met Skyer, a kind of Icelandic yogurt cheese hybrid that's both food and weapon. It's tangy, thick, and somehow tastes like winter depression. A quirky tidbit, some early Norse households used moss as a food sealant, stuffing it between lids and containers to block air and insects. Moss, not just for damp forests and elves anymore. You return to Egypt, where dried dates and figs are sunbaked on woven mats. It's less cooking and more death by dehydration, but sweet, chewy, and shockingly durable. The kind of snack that lasts through a desert journey or a mild apocalypse. You sit in the shade, biting into a shriveled fig that's older than your understanding of joy. It's sticky, rich, and a little too intimate with the sand. Back in Scandinavia, a woman hands you a fermented turnip that's been buried under a compost heap for the better part of a month. You smile, you accept, you nibble. The taste is earthy, like licking a cold boot, but hey, it's full of vitamins and probably not fatal. Here, winter isn't a season, it's a challenge, and food preservation is a high-stakes game of guess what's still edible. Your senses dull, your standards drop. You learn to distinguish between bad smell and safe bad smell. A critical skill. You curl up by the fire, wrapped in rough wool, listening to the slow crackle of dried grain roasting in a pan. It's comforting in a way. You realize this was survival, not gourmet, not clean, not fair, but brilliantly, stomach-turningly clever. And you haven't even reached the lutefisk yet. The problem with ancient preservation is that nobody had refrigerators. Or, more specifically, Nobody had invented the light hum of cool convenience you now call a fridge. Instead, welcome to the world of burial fermentation, ash-rubbed meats, and the truly unforgettable aroma of rotting innovation. You're in for a treat. Let's head back to Egypt first, where heat isn't just a fact of life, it's the villain in every food-based horror story. You're handed a salted fish, its body stiff as a board and coated in a thick crust of salt so dense you wonder if you're supposed to eat it or use it as a doorstop. But this isn't just fish, it's fisik, a delicacy for the bold and possibly the reckless. To preserve it, the fish is left to dry in the sun, sometimes placed inside sealed clay jars where it ferments quietly over weeks, or months, or until someone forgets it and finds it again during a sandstorm. You break off a flake with your teeth. It crumbles, it burns, it lingers in your nose. You swallow, you regret. Historians still argue whether Fesic-style methods originated during the Old Kingdom or later. What they do agree on is that ancient Egyptians were the masters of turning almost spoiled into barely edible. Meanwhile, in early Scandinavia, you crouch next to a smoldering fire pit as a thick cut of reindeer jerky sizzles above glowing embers. Smoking is not just a cooking method, it's a lifestyle. The meat, dark and leathery, is infused with birch smoke and desperation. It's been drying for 2 days, maybe more. You chew it like you're gnawing on a sandal. But hey, it's protein. You enter a turf house. It smells like wool, sweat, and smoked everything. Meat is strung up across rafters, dangling like wind chimes of survival. A child runs past with a hunk of dried cod. He bites off a piece and continues running, teeth bared, as though chased by a herring-based curse. A quirky tidbit in some Norse communities. Ash and lye were used to cure fish, yes. Actual lye, the same caustic agent found in modern drain cleaner. The dish, lutefisk. It jiggles, it shines. It looks like regret in jelly form. You scoop a bite. It slides onto your tongue like a dare. It tastes like soap and broken dreams. But you nod politely. Because in this world, if it doesn't try to kill you, it counts as dinner. Back in the desert, an old woman teaches you to seal honey in ceramic jars, burying them beneath layers of hot sand and cloth. This wasn't just sweetness, it was survival sugar. Bees did their part. Humans simply had to make sure the ants didn't undo it. You're handed a honey cake, crumbly and dense, baked with flour made from lentils and crushed barley. It's the ancient equivalent of a protein bar designed to last for years and break a tooth if needed. It's all brilliant, in a terrifying way. The Egyptians used smoke, salt, drying and burial. The Norse cold, fermentation and eternal optimism. And neither had the luxury of best-by dates, just the smell test and a willingness to gamble with intestinal drama. You sigh and swallow one last bite of dried fish leather. It gets stuck in your molar, whispering ancient threats. You lie back by the fire, eyes closed, wondering if you've just eaten something from 200 BC, or 20 minutes past spoiled. You wake up before dawn, which in ancient Scandinavia feels a bit like crawling out of a refrigerated coffin. The air slices into your lungs like it's judging you for surviving the night. You fumble for your tunic's scratchy wool, still damp from yesterday's fog, and shuffle toward the communal pit where breakfast waits. Or rather, breakfast waits to disappoint. This morning's offering salted seal blubber. It's dense, pale, and looks suspiciously like a used eraser. You chew slowly, thoughtfully, like someone pretending this isn't a deeply personal attack on their dignity. Preservation, yes. Pleasure, not remotely. Meanwhile, in a mud brick home beside the Nile, the sun hasn't even risen, but someone's already hauling baskets of dates to the roof for sun-drying. Dried dates are a staple here, tough, sweet, and coated in desert dust. You snag one, bite down, and pretend the crunch came from the fruit and not a tiny pebble embedded within. A girl grinds wheat nearby, turning it into coarse flour for durra bread. Once baked, it resembles a thin, crunchy frisbee and tastes about as thrilling. You smear it with preserved cheese that smells faintly like feet wrapped in linen. Congratulations, you've just made the world's saddest open-faced sandwich. And yet, preservation isn't just about flavor, it's about strategy. You trail a group of Norse farmers preparing a fish cache for winter. The method: bury it under rocks and moss near the river. letting the cold water preserve it naturally. It's clever, it's old-school refrigeration, and it comes with one minor side effect: it smells like low tide's revenge. You lift a slab, it jiggles. You prod it jiggles again. You eat it jiggles. Inside you now. Scholars still argue whether early Scandinavian burial techniques were invented out of necessity or regional eccentricity. But either way, they were experts at making food last months, sometimes even years, without the help of plastic wrap or freezer burn. In Egypt, you're helping to pack amphorae, large clay jars for transport. Inside a mash of lentils, dried figs, and aged goat cheese. The jars are sealed with beeswax and linen, stacked carefully on reed mats. They're heading down the Nile by barge. Food miles, ancient style. You sneak a bite before the lid closes. It's chewy, salty, and oddly tangy. Your stomach does a somersault. It's hard to tell if that's a good sign. Here's a fun little tidbit in both cultures. Fermentation wasn't just tolerated, it was celebrated. In Egypt, sour beer made from barley mash was consumed daily, sometimes flavored with herbs. In Scandinavia, fermented milk, aka soured milk or skyr, was a breakfast hero. You drink it now, and your taste buds immediately file a complaint. Everything preserved, stored, dried or buried comes with an invisible label: trust at your own risk. And yet, you do. Because the alternative is hunger. And in these ancient lands, hunger doesn't just knock, it kicks down doors and helps itself to your stored grain. So you keep eating the jerky, the dried fish, the pickled turnips, the fermented whatever that was. You chew slowly, you breathe through your mouth. You survive. You trudge out to the communal storehouse. Your feet sinking into mud so cold, it feels like your toes are filing a lawsuit. Welcome to food security, Iron Age edition, in ancient Scandinavia. It's less of a pantry and more of a glorified shed with antlers nailed above the door for luck or intimidation. Inside, it's damp, dark, and smells like onions lost a war with mildew. You lift the wooden lid of a barrel, and ah yes, there it is. The unmistakable perfume of ancient fish sauce. Or garum-like concoctions made from rotting herring. A delicacy. Maybe. A crime against your nose. Definitely. Historians still argue whether this was truly seasoning or a social deterrent. But either way, it kept people at least 3 feet away. Meanwhile, in Egypt, you slip into a granary, one of those long, domed mud structures lined with narrow staircases and guarded like it holds sacred scrolls. Which, in a way, it does. Dried wheat, barley, lentils, more lentils, and surprise, a few more lentils. The guard nods, and you scoop some into your woven bag, aware that your life for the next week will taste mostly like papery legumes. Food preservation here is half science, half social structure. The pharaoh's own grain stores are protected against floods and rodents by architecture so clever even modern engineers raise an eyebrow. Your own little stash, however, is hidden in a pot behind your sleeping mat, just in case. And what if something goes wrong in Scandinavia? If your winter storehouse leaks or worse? If mold gets cozy in your meat rack, you're one spoiled goat thigh away from a starvation festival. You poke a suspicious-looking cheese wheel with a stick. It wobbles like it's haunted. You cut off the blue part. You eat the other half. You do not make eye contact with anyone afterward. Back in Egypt, it's the sun you fear. Fermented foods need shade and patience. You help hang onions in mesh bags from the ceiling, like weird, aromatic chandeliers. Dried fish are fanned out on woven mats, each one carefully salted and flipped in the heat. It's slow work, and you smell like the inside of a clay oven. But you're part of something ancient, practical, weirdly elegant. Now for the bonus round, Scandinavian blood pancakes. Yes, they're exactly what they sound like. You pour pig's blood into barley flour, add a splash of milk, and fry it on a flat rock over fire. You try one. It's chewy, salty, metallic. You remind yourself it's a protein source and definitely not a prank. Possibly both. Preservation wasn't just about storage, it was about rituals. In Egypt, every preserved item had symbolic meaning. Dates were offered to the gods, honey sealed into tombs, beer brewed for the afterlife. You watch a priest chant over amphorae. You sneak one afterward. It's fizzy, sour, and possibly alcoholic. A win. Back in the north, you gather dried berries from a leather pouch, lingonberries, sour and shriveled like old secrets. You chew, eyes on the snow, the wind howls, and you pull your wool wrap tighter, thinking about the smoked meats back at camp, if they're not moldy. Their dinner, if they are, well, it builds character. And maybe that's the strange beauty of it all. In the absence of refrigeration or preservatives with names like E452, humans leaned hard into flavor, fermentation, and the occasional brush with gastrointestinal disaster. And through it all, you eat. And you carry on because food, even weird, ancient food, is still survival. You rise before the sun, lungs already filled with the heavy scent of yesterday's smoke. A new day, a new challenge protecting what little food you've worked so hard to preserve. Today, you're not cooking, drying, salting, or fermenting. Today, you're guarding. In the highlands of ancient Scandinavia, food theft isn't just rude, it's a survival gamble. You sit outside the cold storehouse, armed with a stick and a scowl, listening for footsteps or crows, especially the crows. They're clever, cunning, and somehow always hungry. You've seen one fly off with a whole dried eel like it was late for a dinner party. Historians still argue whether Norse scarecrows existed or if everyone just relied on loud yelling. Meanwhile, in the bustling towns along the Nile, you're facing a different battle bureaucracy. You stand in a line of other farmers, each with baskets of dried lentils, desiccated fish, and maybe the occasional honey cake. A scribe tallies your contribution to the state grain reserve. Yes, even food you made with your own blistered hands sometimes goes to feed bureaucrats, priests, or the state granaries for redistribution. It's called tax, or theft, depending on your mood. Storage conditions. Well, ideal is a fantasy reserved for pharaohs and whoever gets to nap in the shade. For you, it's clay pots in pits, or baskets hung from beams to keep rats, snakes, and that one particularly bold goat at bay. You once found a weasel in your millet. It stared back with guiltless eyes. You let it stay. It eats bugs. After all, in the cold north, preservation means fighting time. Every day you delay checking your stores is a gamble. Salted meats can grow a surprising beard of mold. You slice away the worst parts, pretending you're a doctor performing surgery on a very unlucky ham. There are no refrigerators, just prayer and frost. And frost sometimes forgets to show up. In Egypt, you wrestle with humidity. Clay ceilings crack, jars sweat, bees come looking for their stolen honey. You press date paste into jars and pour oil on top as a seal. But sometimes, things bubble. That's either fermentation or trouble. You do the smell test and the finger test. You do not do the second bite test. And yet, despite all odds, this bizarre system works. Sort of. Most of the time, it's a balance between nature, desperation, and generations of trial and error. There's a rhythm to it now. Hang, dry, salt, guard, eat, repeat. Even religion plays its part. In Scandinavia, the Yule feast is sacred, made possible by months of prep and hope. You bite into smoked lamb, savoring the miracle that no one tripped and dropped it down a ravine. In Egypt, feasts are tied to the Nile's flooding. Good harvest, date wine flows. Bad flood, it's porridge and prayers. One quirky tidbit, lost in the footnotes, some Egyptians believed that pickled onions could protect against curses. So you always carry one in your pouch, just in case your lunch tries to hex you. You fall asleep beside your jars and racks and salted mystery meats. Your hands smell like herbs, smoke and faint dread. But your belly's full. And for another night, you've beaten the spoilage, the bugs, the rats, the gods, and even the weasel. Food, in all its ancient weirdness, has kept you alive. Now, as the fire dims to soft coals and the cold settles into silence, you lie back on a bed of furs and dust and half-faded rituals. The jars are sealed, the fish is hung, the bugs, for now, are at bay. Your hands relax. The smoke in your lungs quiets. The ancient world doesn't rest easy, but tonight, it pauses. And you, somehow, have made it through. through salty broths and sour milk, through buzzing flies and sacred granaries, through food that could heal you or absolutely wreck you. Let your breath slow now. Let the last thoughts drift away, like the faint scent of dried herbs on a cool night breeze. The night is calm. You've done enough. Now, we tiptoe into a world where your survival depends on drying meat before it turns into something smarter than you. You're standing under a blinding Egyptian sun, barefoot on sand so hot it could double as a cooking surface. And it kind of does. Welcome to the dawn of food preservation, where ancient Egyptians embraced the 3 S's: sun, salt, and sheer hope. You would never think that beef could be mummified without any gods involved, but here we are, transforming flesh into a chewy artifact because refrigeration hasn't RSVP'd yet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me your local time and where you're listening from, because I'd love to know if you're snacking during this episode. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch down, brushing away a layer of sand from a slab of meat that's been drying in the sun for 2 days. It's not technically cooked, but it's also not technically raw anymore. Somewhere between jerky and fossil. You bite into it, and it flakes like wood. Congratulations, you've survived another meal without vomiting, dying, or making new bacterial friends. Ancient Egyptians, to their credit, knew a thing or two about preservation. They didn't just embalm people, they applied the same logic to lunch. Salt was the MVP. Rub it on, pile it on, bury the meat in it. No such thing as too salty if your tongue recoils. It means the bacteria will too. Drying food with sunlight and desert wind became a cultural standard, something you can only appreciate after spending 6 hours chasing off flies with a palm fan. You're sweating profusely because the process happens outdoors. Obviously, no cozy kitchens here, just open-air platforms and large, flat stones. Meat was laid out like tanning tourists, rubbed in salt until it looked offended. The sun did the rest, assuming no curious jackal interrupted your prep. Fringe fact: some evidence suggests dried fish were stored in clay pots with ash layers to absorb moisture, sort of like ancient vacuum sealing, but without the seal. Historians still argue whether this technique evolved from funerary practices. Did the idea of drying flesh originate in tombs and just wander into kitchens by accident? It wouldn't be the first time death inspired dinner. Your neighbor, a cheerful woman, missing 2 front teeth, hands you a strip of sun chicken. You nod politely, chew, and smile as your jaw dislocates slightly. The texture is what scientists would classify as regretful, but it lasts weeks, even months if you keep it dry and keep the cats away. And of course, cats were everywhere, partly because ancient Egyptians adored them, and partly because dried meat was basically an all-you-can-steal buffet. You sleep with your ration tucked under your armpit, praying it doesn't go missing by morning. Spoiled food means spoiled health, and out here, food poisoning is just another form of divine judgment. The real genius of it all, no fancy tools, just sun, salt, sand, and an extremely risky relationship with time. Every meal is a bet. Will it feed you or finish you? You don't know. You never really know. Your mouth still tastes like salted regret from breakfast, and your stomach groans like a sarcophagus lid being pried open. But you push onward. Now you're thousands of miles north, standing ankle-deep in slush, wrapped in fur that smells suspiciously like wet dog. Welcome to ancient Scandinavia, where food preservation isn't just a choice, it's the only reason you don't starve to death before May. The wind slices through your sealskin coat like a jealous ghost. You're lugging a basket of dried fish if we're being generous with the term fish. Technically, it's stockfish cod that's been gutted, cleaned, and hung up to freeze dry in the icy air for months. Yes, you're dining on meat that's been strategically abused by Mother Nature. This preservation trick is 1 part weather, 1 part prayer. Fish are strung up like holiday decorations across wooden racks known as gel, left to dehydrate in sub-zero breezes. The cold prevents bacteria from multiplying. The wind wicks away moisture. It's like a gourmet spa treatment for cod, only it ends with you gnawing through its corpse in April. You don't choose stockfish so much as negotiate with it. After hours of boiling, yes. Boiling it still has the texture of a shoe sole. And yet, it's precious. A single dried cod can last months. Some were even used as currency. That's right, in 13th century Norway, you could pay your rent in petrified fish. Meanwhile, you're trying not to cry because that would create icicles on your eyelashes. As you chip a frozen turnip out of the snow, your stomach pleads for something warm, soft, and not resembling a Viking boot. Too bad. Today's dinner is fermented trout, which has been buried underground in a wooden barrel, left to rot gently until it develops its trademark perfume. Ancient sock meets open grave. And yet, they loved it, or they tolerated it. Either way, they ate it. Mainstream historical fact: Scandinavians did, in fact, preserve fish and meat via open-air drying and underground fermentation, particularly in Iceland and coastal Norway. Fringe tidbit: some fermented foods were left so long they literally squirmed when served. Yum. Historians still argue whether this fermentation craze stemmed from sheer necessity or if it also held ritualistic or social prestige. Was eating something aggressively smelly a flex, a dare, a rite of passage? No one agrees, but your gag reflex says no thank you. You retreat into a smoky hut. Inside, sausages dangle from wooden beams like meaty stalactites, curing over an open fire. The smoke dries them slowly, imbuing everything meat, walls, and you with a scent that can only be described as wooden barbecue ghost. Your nose has stopped working, but your instincts scream that dinner might be edible. Of course, it's not all despair. The fermented butter you're spreading on that flatbread is smooth, sour, and definitely alive. It's been buried in sheepskin for a few years. They call it rancid cream, you call it character development. You curl up beside the hearth, surrounded by smoke, dried meat, and silent judgment. Your stomach may never forgive you, but at least you'll survive the winter. Probably. You wake up coughing, your lungs filled with yesterday's smoked sausage air. As the fire smolders low, you rise to check the winter stores because nothing says good morning like a cellar full of slowly decaying root vegetables and a jar of suspiciously twitchy pickled herring. This time, you're back in Egypt. The sun hasn't risen yet, but the stone walls are already warm. You shuffle toward the pantry, passing racks of dates and figs shriveled like forgotten thumbs. You sigh. Another breakfast of pickled onions and dried goose, stored in ceramic pots so old they may have once hosted a pharaoh's lunch. You try not to think about the smell, or the texture, or the fact that edibility here is more of a guideline than a rule. In Egypt, salt is more than a flavor, it's a tool, a preservative, a minor deity. Fish were gutted, packed with salt and left to dry in the scorching desert heat, turning into something that vaguely resembles jerky and vaguely doesn't resemble food. This was known as feces, and it was beloved and feared in equal measure. One wrong step in the salting process, and the fish goes from pungent treat to biological weapon. Historians still argue whether pheasant originated as a festival delicacy or a preservation hack gone rogue. Either way, it's still eaten today in some Egyptian celebrations though now. Thankfully, with a little more food safety oversight, you're handed a dried fish wrapped in linen. The linen was probably reused, and the fish definitely wasn't. You bite down carefully, like you're disarming a landmine. It's chewy, salty, and oddly tangy, as if it's judging you for being soft. Back in Scandinavia, your cousin is digging a pit. She's about to make skyer, a type of cultured dairy that's somewhere between yogurt and existential dread, left to ferment for days. It's tangy, thick, and may contain uninvited textures, but it keeps. Oh, how it keeps. Add a dash of ash or a sprinkle of moss, and congratulations, you've got dairy that lasts through Ragnarok. The preservation rulebook here is simple if it can't survive months of snow, mold, and the occasional rodent visitor. It doesn't get eaten, or more precisely it does, but only once it smells like a Viking funeral. Your hands are sticky with honey. No, it's not dessert. It's a preservation agent. Ancient Egyptians used honey to seal fruits, coat meats, and allegedly mummify small birds. Sticky, yes. Effective also, yes. It kept the ants out, the rot at bay, and the neighbors mildly jealous. Mainstream fact honey is antimicrobial and was widely used as a preservative in ancient Egypt. Quirky tidbit in some cases, entire jars of meat submerged in honey have been found in tombs. Meant for the afterlife because even in death, nobody wants bland food. Outside, someone opens a clay pot. You reel from the wave of sour air. Pickled garlic, aged in vinegar, spiced with cumin, sealed for months. Your eyes water. It's either deeply preserved or planning an uprising. The debate rages on in academic circles. Did these intense preservation methods originate from pragmatic desert survival, or did taste actually evolve to enjoy that fermented funk? Your tongue casts a firm vote for emergency rations only. But your host insists it's delicious. You nod politely and take another bite. It's the polite thing to do. Also, refusing food in ancient households is a great way to be remembered as that rude one who mysteriously disappeared. You chase it down with beer that's older than your dignity. It's warm, thick, and full of floating bits protein, if you're optimistic. Congratulations, you've officially eaten your way through some of the oldest food science experiments in the world. Your stomach, meanwhile, files for historical trauma. Now you're deep in the Norse countryside, standing over a wooden trough filled with what looks like meat and smells like regret. You lean closer. No, it's not a mistake. It's a Carl Greenland shark, buried underground and left to rot until edible, which is a very generous word here. Then it's hung to dry in open air, where the wind and flies provide the final seasoning. This isn't a prank. This is dinner. You'd never think that something once swimming could transform into a chewy, ammonia-scented cube of existential dread. But here we are. The Vikings didn't have fridges, freezers, or even a vague sense of mercy when it came to preserving food. They had time, and they had fermentation. And apparently, they had no working noses. You pop a piece of hakal into your mouth, and your tongue screams in betrayal. The flavor hits like a chemical factory on fire, followed by notes of despair and a faint hint of why me. There is no modern palate prepared for this, except maybe people who chew bleach for fun. You chase it down with a shot of Brennivin, lovingly nicknamed Black Death, which is a fitting chaser when you're gambling with fermented fish toxins. Over in Egypt, the methods are slightly more elegant, if you can call soaking meat in natron elegant. Natron, the ancient drying agent made of sodium carbonate, was used to desiccate not only food but bodies. Because if you're good enough for mummification, you're definitely good enough to keep jerky fresh.